This was a very difficult week, so excuse me for delivering what I think is a difficult sermon this Shabbat. It was only a few days ago when the world was awakened to the heart-shattering news that 4 hostages, Shiri Bibas, her children Ariel and Kfir, and Oded Lifshitz, 4 faces that have been posted on the walls of our synagogue for over 500 days, are no longer with us. The murder of an innocent mother, her 2 children, and an elderly grandfather, torn from their home and paraded as trophies of terror, leaves us with an unbearable void. News that cuts like a knife through our hearts, the families' hearts, and the hearts of good people all over the world. And there's not only grief, there's a lot of anger, a lot of rage. We're not only mourning, there's anger and there's also despair, because it is not only the loss of innocent lives that breaks us, it is the depravity of the hundreds and thousands who are celebrating these deaths, the cold-hearted cruelty of those who parade murder as victory. It is the discovery that the body that was returned to Israel was not, in fact, that of Shiri Bibas, leaving us to ask, what more horrors have been inflicted here? What more desecrations remain hidden? For over 500 days, the faces of Shiri Bibas, her baby Kfir, her son Ariel, and Oded Lifshitz have been before us, pleading for justice. Their suffering was not an accident. Their murders were not the consequence of a war. They were deliberate acts of evil, embraced and cheered by those who claim innocence. The same streets that we were told were filled with helpless civilians have been filled instead with celebrations of terror, with crowds rejoicing in the slaughter of children. This is not resistance. It is not a tragedy to be contextualized or explained away. This is barbarism. Barbarism, plain and simple. So today on Shabbat, I thought to ask, what does our tradition demand of us at this moment? How do we respond, not just with words, but with action? And how do we remember and uphold our values while refusing to remain silent in the face of this moral abyss? Providentially, our Torah speaks to us in this moment. Parshat Mishpatim lays before us the foundations of justice, of moral clarity, of what it means to build a righteous society in the face of those who revel in destruction. And through its wisdom, I hope we can find a response. I want to highlight 3 key lessons. The first, the clear distinction between good and evil. Mishpatim opens with the laws that govern the treatment of others, especially the most vulnerable. V'ger lo toneh v'lo tilchatzenu, ki gerim hayitem be'eretz Mitzrayim. Do not oppress the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. On this, the commentator Ibn Ezra adds, whoever sees a person afflicting the orphan, the widow, the helpless, and does not aid them, he is also considered an afflictor. Our tradition demands moral clarity. We are called to recognize suffering and stand against injustice. Yet today we live in a world where too many are confused. Too many remain silent in the face of barbarity, unwilling to call evil by its name. The Bibas family's murder is not a political issue. It shouldn't be a conflict. It is not a tragedy among tragedies to be measured and compared. It is a moral crime of the highest order, a grotesque violation of everything the Torah commands. Those who fail to see this distinction, those who justify or minimize such atrocities, are not only ignorant, they are complicit. That is what Ibn Ezra is saying. You stand by and do nothing, you are complicit. Our Torah does not grant moral neutrality when human lives are desecrated. It calls upon us to see the line between good and evil, see it clearly, and stand firmly on the side of good. This, perhaps, is one of the most painful aspects of this moment, that so many have sought to justify, excuse, or explain away the horrors of October 7th and their aftermath. That some have dared to call the murder of infants and mothers an act of resistance. That some have embraced a narrative that erases the humanity of the victims. The Torah commands otherwise. It commands us to recognize evil when we see it, to resist the moral equivocation that so often accompanies violence against our people. It commands us to remember that justice is not an abstraction, it is a demand. The second lesson is the obligation to pursue justice. Lo tihiyeh achrei rabim lara'ot. Do not follow the multitude to do evil. We live in a time when many are swayed by the crowd, where social pressure distorts truth, and where lies are repeated over and over again until they sound like reality. Those who cheered on the freedom fighters that abducted the Bibas family, those who justified the unspeakable crimes of October 7th, they are part of this multitude of evil. But the Torah commands something different from us. We are obligated to pursue justice, to defend the innocent, and to resist the tide of moral relativism. Justice requires accountability. It requires that we name the crimes of Hamas for what they are, evil. And it requires that we remain unwavering in our demand for the safe return of every hostage, for the protection of Jewish life, and for a world where terror is never excused. And justice does not come passively, it requires action. We must ensure that the world does not forget the faces of the Bibas family. We must ensure that their names are spoken in halls of power, in places where decisions are made. We must ensure that those who commit such crimes and those who enable them face the full weight of justice, and we must remain vigilant because our history has shown us what happens when the world chooses to look away. And the third lesson, perhaps the most painful lesson of all, is found in the Torah's emphasis on the value of every human soul. Makeh ish vamet, mot yumat. One who strikes a person and kills him shall surely be put to death. This law, foundational to civilization, teaches us that murder is the ultimate crime, but it teaches something else as well. Makeh ish va-met mot yumat. Do you hear the threefold met? It says it 3 times. When a murder happens, the victim dies, the perpetrator will be put to death, but there's another death that happens too, the destruction of an image of God. How to process the deaths of Shiri, Ariel, and Kfir Bibas, and Oded Lifshitz. These were not just names. They were beloved people. Oded was a journalist and peace activist who helped found kibbutz Nir Oz, dedicating his life to helping others, even transporting sick Gazans to Israeli hospitals. His grandchildren called him Super Grandpa for his wisdom and love. Shiri was a dedicated mother and accountant, known for her boundless kindness, nurturing, and caring for all the kibbutz children. She touched everyone's heart with her capacity for giving and love. Ariel, just 4 years old when kidnapped, loved Batman and playing with tractors in the garden. Baby Kfir, not even 1 year old when taken, had gorgeous red hair and a smile that could melt any person. They had families who cherished them, dreams and futures that were stolen from them. And now we grieve not only for them, but for the other precious lives lost, including more deceased hostages who will be returned this week. This is the loss of humanity, the loss of images of God. It is a wound that will not heal. One friend of mine, writing about her heartbreak on her Facebook wall earlier this week, ended her words with a lament. Humanity is sick, she wrote, very sick. I hope we can find the remedy to cure it sooner rather than later. I offer my words to you today, this sermon, to answer her yearnings. Yes, humanity is sick, but we do have a moral guide that gives us the remedy to that and every other sickness. It is the law of justice. It is the law of moral clarity. It is the law of compassion for the innocent. It is the law of unwavering opposition to evil. Unwavering. We have to understand this is not an abstract struggle. It is not a philosophical debate. This is a war for the soul of humanity itself. Good and evil are not shades of the same color. We cannot tolerate those who excuse or explain away the slaughter of the innocent. The line has been drawn. I hope you all see it. Clearer than ever, a line has been drawn in blood, in fire, in screams that the world dares to ignore. And we will not cross it, not in our hearts, not in our words, not in our deeds. We will not forgive, we will not forget. Lo nishkach velo nislach. These 4 words were written in Hebrew on sweatshirts that were provided by Israel to the terrorists who were released in exchange for these 4 dead bodies. But it's a message for all of us. Lo nishkach velo nislach. There are some things that we can never forget. There's some things that we can never forgive. We're not going to allow the purity of the Bibas family and the other victims of this nightmare to be swallowed up by history. We will speak their names, we will tell their stories, and their memory will be a sword against the darkness. And to those who still refuse to see the line between good and evil, to those who remain confused, who call murderers freedom fighters, who justify unspeakable cruelty, we say this: you have forsaken the covenant of humanity. You have abandoned all moral claim. We have nothing in common with you, and we don't want to have anything in common with you. You can call it ethnic cleansing. You can call it whatever you want. We don't hate you. We don't want you dead. We just want you far, far away from us. Far, far away from us. May the memory of Shiri, Ariel, Kfir, Oded, and every soul taken from us in hatred be a blessing. And may we, through our strength, through our faith, through our unbreakable spirit, bring about the justice that their murderers and all who enable them so richly deserve. Shabbat Shalom.